I bring you here, Dare, as not only a representative of the other side, the student learning side, so we have a voice against our professor in case we are confused on the subject.
As times change, there's new knowledge that younger people may know. Then,
Indeed.
yeah,
As well as the fact that you are a trusted colleague of mine, and like I said, I took support classes for this subject. But I trust to have an accurate depiction of what this information should actually be telling you, and if he is being a good professor. That's it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say valid enough.
Let's really jump into this then.
Great. This is the waifu detection gland.
First of all,
that tingles every single time it's Wednesday.
Okay, I want. So I wanted to.
Wednesday.
Damn it. So the reason I pause immediately is because he will go on with the subject, but I have an article here that claims that hypertension in the brain has been increased in younger adults ever since they've been consuming more media of the foreign variety, such as, and there's a actual bookmark in this article, see reference to Hunter x Hunter X Netflix animes and Hulu anime series for American young viewers. I have to...
Now, here's the problem, though.
I have to ask you.
Fuck's sake. Is that an actual thing?
You thought I was a bit? No, it's a real thing! It's a real thing!
Like, people, there's actually higher risks of hypertension because
your mind is so the actual reason, it's more like, oh, they've been too glued to their screens, as well as there's more activity on the screens nowadays. If they're watching something that is translated, they're working harder to process the reading information with visuals, and therefore the brain is getting more tired easily. They should drink more water, blah blah blah, things like that.
Yeah, hypertension can also be a part from poor health and low exercise.
Exactly, which again is
Now look, correlation does not equal causation.
It does not. But according to this article, it kind of seems to be flowing that way for how society views this.
Does that how the fuck do they ascertain that information? How do they gain it? For one thing, it's oh,
I'm glad you asked.
So you have high blood pressure, right? You looking at those anime titties?
I'm glad you
asked. Is that what they're fucking saying at the doctor's office?
The University of Phoenix conducted a study. Of course, it's Phoenix. Conducted a study Phoenix. At first meant to be of a college graduate of biology who wanted to study how to make something about, they wanted to make better headache medicine because they suffered from migraines. Asked their fellow students to do a conducted test of their lifestyle and found later changing the subject of his study that the consumers of anime and manga, also any who enjoyed older series like cartoons and had more media-based... oh god, how old was this student? Oh, he was 32. Found that these students had higher risks of having health risks in the future as they matured in age and kept up with these unhealthy lifestyles.
Yeah, so it's more of based off of your lifestyle rather than just, oh, he's looking at anime titties.
Exactly.
Yeah, so which is a logical conclusion based off of science that we've already gathered over the last couple of decades.
All this to come back to, do you think the waifu detection center of the brain will be harmed if their continued lifestyle goes like this?
Well, think of it like this. Your skin is an organ, but your muscles are something that you gain strength with continued use, as long as they're not overextended.
Okay,
but the same thing with your brain being compared to a muscle that if you work it, its capacity will increase. So if for a veteran weeb, as someone who has gone on in the elder years, they've had more use of that gland having its workout. So there might be a higher tolerance to, say, a weeblet who may not have a well-developed waifu detection gland. So he may be prone to some spasms to where, even if they're low-tier trash characters, it might signal, oh, top-tier waifu signals to the brain, which may cause some confusion in the young weeblet before they've gained some knowledge and wisdom.
Okay. So now I'm glad you brought up the trash taste part, because now we're gonna move away from like my serious question about that. That was a legitimate question I had for you. We're gonna move away from that and go back into us being, the bit, coming back into this, like actually talking about, random ass shit. He brings up the low. Actually, we'll watch a bit, and here we go.
Is a vestigial remnant from the past, the most primal weeaboos, long ago, passed down this survival trait, a biological adaptation to be able to help the brain recognize thick thighs and snaggle teeth. The waifu detection gland, right there. Located right under the waifu detection gland is the low standard lobe.
So
okay, right here. This
is
primarily in charge of liking Deku as a main character. It also allows the brain to think that Chitoge is the best girl in Nisekoi. Very unfortunate.
Oh my god!
A lot of effort in the educational community. Try to surgically remove this lobe from the weeaboo's brain, but we have been unsuccessful in over 143 cases.
So the reason I'm pausing here.
Deku's just Naruto, but sadder.
So this is exactly where I was gonna bring up the fact that no, Naruto, while being sadder, is a good protagonist.
Yeah, which it's even worse when you know his entire trope was based off of Super Saiyan Goku versus Vegeta, and that's why Sasuke Naruto's dynamic exists.
It's so fucking funny to see this, and as an intellectual, now going back to the to the actual lesson, so those 143 cases he talks about, apparently those cases also had an experiment to try to just remove small pieces of it instead of the entire lobe. So the small pieces, unfortunately, would sometimes interfere with the waifu detection gland. And that's what I believe is kind of causing this trash taste at times. Those 143 cases were a bit skewed, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, like I don't think that the whole practice of low standard lobe lobotomy operations were necessarily peer-reviewed sciences, to where there's actually more modern research in weebology today that suggests that the waifu detection gland and the lower standard lobe actually have a syncretic and a dualistic type of relationship with one another in the weeb's brain. Okay. To where, yes, there were early signalings in the waifu detection gland in premature weeblets to where they could have these spikes of low trash tier waifus, but that brings up the question of whether or not they are synonymous in function, because as there are hyperfirings within the lobe, those electrical signals traveling through the lobe could theoretically be firing off and causing interference with the low standard lobe, causing these trash tier waifus to be cemented within their psyche.
What also brings up the question is, I took a further look into this, and like you said, those 143 studies were done. They were also usually on the older, as you called them, the veteran weebs. I wonder if they took the brain of a weeb who was a weeblet that was going through puberty at the time. Would we see a difference in the development of the lobes now versus those of the higher generation? As he said, the waifu detection gland has been there since millennia for us as a survival skill. But I want to know just how much is changing within these few years as technology has advanced, as more archives of the anime culture has been uncovered. I want to know how the generations are developing. Are there just pathways in the brain that were not found before because the weeboos of this generation are now more prone to seeing everything on R34 and putting that into their actual consideration of if the character is good or not, just based on attractiveness, while the older generation being left to interpretation more often than not, and having also quality of these treasures and anime being a bit lower res, we'll say, would appreciate a character purely based on their form, their story, and their actual being in the show.
Oh yes, yeah. With that question leading into it, I think there is a question that should be brought up within the weebology academia sphere of it is just like how the waifu detection gland and the low standard lobe have a dualistic relationship. What if there's also some type of syncretic relationship between nature and nurture, so to speak? As we see with veteran weebs, their low standard lobe has less firing of neurons, and as we see through certain MRIs that there's even hinting at certain reductions in gray matter within that section of the brain, and maintaining a constant all throughout age in the waifu detection gland. But it also brings up the question of, with these rise in trash tier waifus going on, could this affect the development of the low standard lobe and these misfirings that seem to be endlessly perpetuated in our mainstream anime media, which could in turn lead to a lower reduction of gray matter within the low standard lobe region, and how that could bring problems to the development of more trash tier characters like, say, Deku or Chitoge or even Eren.
Thank you for bringing up such a controversial topic on Eren. I know the fandoms are outraged by his standards.
I agree. It's a case study all on its own, but still something that's being, vaguely brought up nonetheless.
Let us continue the study.
Yes.
Test surgeries done. The weeb has unfortunately not survived the attempted removal of the low standard lobe. Unfortunately,
they were very dangerous tests.
Deal with.
It's very hard to recognize right
like
there.
I said, non-peer reviewed.
Ancillary to the waifu detection gland and the low standard lobe is this tiny little gland right here, the Merch inhibitor gland.
Now, there is no.
I will say, I have not heard much of this particular gland. It must be a new area of study.
It is, and the reason I paused here is there is no joke. I'm just recognizing I have a problem.
Okay. And what inhibitor does?
Okay. Anyway.
God, this. How the fuck do we even retrace what the fuck we've been on?
I don't know.
We've been in such a trend. Let's fucking just keep going.
Okay, let's go.
You'll figure it out.
We'll see.
What's the top section of the brain?
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank goodness you're here. Thank God we have a mediator. Thank God we have a mediator. Get in here.
I can read a diagram. Pretty good.
Okay, Kylie, we're about to talk about the Merch inhibitor gland. Okay?
Yeah, that's pretty small on me too.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, that's why it's so small in the diagram. Apparently it's a very new study in the webology area of academia.
We hadn't gotten anything new in the webology area since the 80s, I believe, when it was really at its peak.
Well, thanks to a bunch of Funimation funding that has caused shortcomings within the development sphere, we were unfortunately frozen in time, so to speak, in that area of science.
I heard that's why the quality of such merch and the way the distributors handle everything has gone down over the years. Where it hasn't actually gone in a downward direction, it's just stayed in that point in time. It has not received any innovation. It's gotten no new technologies to do stuff with.
No progress is the opposite of progress.
Indeed.
Definitely hyperinflated by the maintained mass of the low standard lobe with aging weebs.
Indeed. As a non-weeb veteran or a weeblet, if I may, you enjoy a good anime, but you're not induced in the culture, right? Correct?
I almost never watch anime because the culture shock is high.
Then I'm glad to have your opinion here. We need someone who is from the outside even to kind of mitigate us as well. So let us continue.
And what this is actually common in humans as well. What the Merch inhibitor does is it's
notice the term in humans as well.
In humans as well as weebs, there is a gland within the brain that does a similar function.
So, what is it like in a human, Kylie, versus an actual
weeb? The problem is that the nerd and geek brain, similar somewhat. Well, mostly geek, actually. The geek brain, similar to the weeaboo brain, also suffers from a small Merc inhibitor gland.
So it's almost a common trait in all subspecies of human, not just main humans.
Indeed, humans appear to like buying things.
Yes, and there has been a shortcoming in the inhibition of their habits as well.
Oh, 100%. And I would blame that.
More often than not, the Merc inhibitor gland actually has to be induced to be enlarged. Mainly caused by more often than not the funds, but also induction in society.
So even just their rank in the outside world determines how big their gland might actually be.
Indeed, it's
So not just the waifu detection and low standard lobe synchronology that exists within the brain,
but within
also...
the merch inhibitor gland, maybe because it is axillary to those two lobes.
And
it's very it's very environmentally affected.
While
small, is it nature versus nurture aspect as well as to why we see this trend of less degrading in the gray matter mass of low standard lobes over the aging of weebs.
Gotcha.
The same thing with our lack of growth within the inhibitor glands of merch, or say any other type of inhibitor gland in the subspecies of humans.
Huh. Yeah. I really gotta touch up on my human biology. I'm not familiar with it as much.
We're going over Monster Girls 101, a holistic approach to answering the question, the age-old question, which is the best Monster Girl waifu? We need to start with a definition, and not coming from any source, but I think we can start with the layman's understanding of a monster girl. Part monster, part girl. It's in the name. Monster plus girl.
Now, I'm not gonna jump into this because I don't know much about this topic, and I do not. And while I like to explore it, I'm no biologist. So here we go. Monster girls.
More complicated than that. Again, you think of ears, you think of wings, you think of tails. You think of ears and wings and tails on a girl, on a monster girl. The answer is a little more complicated than that. In this lecture, we will be mainly referencing the depiction of monster girls in the serialized show and manga Monster Musume, aka Everyday Life with Monster Girls, which is a much more, perhaps you would say, mainstream in its permeation into popular culture, but I believe more digestible. For an introductory class, I know some of you may be familiar, but you have to understand that some people, this might be their first exposure to Monster Girls.
Kylie, is this your first exposure to Monster Girls?
Properly? Yeah, pretty much.
Nice.
Proper introduction? This is kind of a deep dive subject. Is this just the 101, or are we gonna delve into a few advanced?
This is the 101. This goes more into the biology of it, which I am unfortunately not as informed upon. It's not my field of study.
Yeah, it's more of a niche area,
Exactly.
in all honesty, in this part of academia.
But important to touch upon because of its historical importance.
Plus, it'll just open up more knowledge ways to help explain other things in weebology.
I should probably not do this right now because